Good morning. Yesterday on Edmonton Radio, 6:30 CHED, Elliotte Friedman was on, and he said, and I quote, "There's been some action around Gaudette. I think they are trying to work on something there." Now, normally I don't talk too much about trade rumors, but we are coming up with the trade deadline in about 2 weeks here. This team's struggling to be in the playoff race. We got a bye week. We got not much else to talk about, so let's talk about Adam Gaudette. Some background here. Adam Gaudette was drafted 149th overall back in 2015, so a fifth round pick. Basically crushing it as a fifth round pick. You know, you don't expect a fifth round pick to do anything in the NHL. So he's 24, about 24 and a half. By the start of next season, he will be turning 25. So Adam Gaudette is only playing in his third full season. He played 5 games back in 2018, but those don't really count. So in his rookie season, 2018-2019, 55 games, he had 12 points, 5 goals, 7 assists. So a fine rookie campaign. The next year, which was last year, he had a great year. In the shortened season, he had 59 games played, and he had 33 points, 12 goals, 21 assists. And people are looking at that and saying, okay, this guy's going to be a really good player for us. And then he went and signed for a pretty cheap deal, only 950K on a 1 year deal, basically a bridge deal for Adam Gaudette. But this year, he hasn't had that success that he had last year. In 33 games, he only has 4 goals, 3 assists for 7 points. So going from 33 points in 60 games basically to only 7 points in just half the games is a big drop. So let's talk about why that drop is happening here. One point that I've seen argued online is luck, and this is kind of a fair point, but it's almost the other way around. So Gaudette is shooting at 6.8% this year. Now, if we look at like league average, if we assume league average goaltending is around 905 to 910, you'd expect an average shooter to be at around 9 to 9.5% shooting percentage. So being at 6.8, that supports sort of his unluckiness. You'd expect him to maybe have a couple more goals, maybe 5 or 6 goals, but again, still not a ton. An extra goal or two for sure if his shooting percentage was better. And another stat that supports this is on ice shooting percentage. So this is a little bit more technical, but really it's as simple as what is your team's shooting percentage when you are on the ice. So again, if we expect the average to be 9 to 9.5%, Adam Gaudette's is 4.5%. So when Adam Gaudette's on the ice, this team is scoring half as often on their shots as you would expect. So a huge decline. And this really does sort of set into this. Anyone he's been on the ice with has just been unlucky. His PDO, which is basically your on ice shooting percentage plus your on ice save percentage, which you'd expect to be around 100 for an average player, his is like 95 this year, which is crazy low. And that's definitely just a measure of bad luck for him. But let's go into a counter argument on that and say how lucky he was last year. So last year, his shooting percentage was 16%. The best players in the league strive to be around 16%. Leon Draisaitl's at 17% over his career. Guys like Stamkos, I think, were around there as well. You don't expect your third line somewhat offensive player to be shooting at 16%. So what we've seen this year is basically a regression of last year, sort of settling back into that mean around the 9 or 10% mark. So this regression again makes a lot of sense, bringing him closer to average. It's probably safe to say that Gaudette is probably near his peak as a player. He's 24, turning 25. Most players, like 99% of players, are done developing at this point, right? Not many players get better the later into their 20s they get. At this point, people used to say the prime's around 27. Now people are saying like 23, 24 is the prime. So I think it's probably safe to say if you were to take Gaudette's stats over the last 2 years, maybe the last 3 years even, kind of call it around the middle, you can say he's probably going to be about a 30 to 35 point player, which is valuable to have in your third line. If you're trying to set up a third line as a scoring line, having a guy who can put up 30 to 35 points is definitely a good thing. The issue with Gaudette as a third line player is that if you want to be on a contending team and be on the third line, you got to have a lot more two-way value than Adam Gaudette does. And some stats to show that this sort of isn't the case. One simple one is face-off percentage. And this is why the Canucks have been putting him out on the wing occasionally. Obviously, with the injuries right now they have, they're back at him on center. But his face-off percentage over his first 3 years of his career, 40.4%, 41.2%, and this year so far, 43.5%. So if you're a coach and you want to put your third line out there in a defensive zone face-off, trying to maybe defend a lead. You don't want a guy out there who's only going to win 40% of the faceoffs, because 60% of the time the other team now has the puck in your zone. And Travis Green clearly agrees with this. Gaudette has consistently had really sheltered minutes throughout his NHL career, including this season. So in his first 2 seasons, he was about 59% offensive zone starts. So this means that of all of the faceoffs that took place in either zone, 59% of Gaudette's were in the offensive zone, which is crazy high. Getting really kind minutes given to him. This season he's at 56%, so still quite high. So Travis Green basically only puts Adam Gaudette on the ice if the Canucks are playing in the offensive zone. And even with 56% offensive zone starts, his Corsi, which is shot attempts while you're on the ice, is at 46.6%. So even though he's getting 56% of the offensive zone starts, the other team is getting 54% of the shooting attempts while he is on the ice. One last thing that I wanted to cover on sort of Gaudette's coverage is his contract. Like I mentioned earlier, he makes $950,000 this year. This deal expires this year. He will be an RFA until 2024. So after the season with low numbers, I doubt he's going to get much of a raise, if any. They could give him a 2-year contract and he would still be an RFA for his next contract. But anything 3 years or above would send him right into unrestricted free agency. So let's answer the question that's laid out in the title of this video. Should the Canucks trade Adam Gaudette? The first thing I want to talk about is, are you selling too low? And clearly we've seen Gaudette play better than he has this year. It's probably fair to say he'll have a bounce back year next year, regress back to that mean of being around a 9 to 10% shooter, closer to a 100 PDO instead of the 95 that he's at right now. So trading him away at his worst, in his worst play to date, seems kind of like an ill-advised move. You're sort of riding this low on-ice shooting percentage, making it you think that Gaudette's a worse player than he is. And other GMs are going to try to capitalize on that, right? If you're trying to trade for Adam Gaudette and someone comes at you and says, well, look, he had 33 points last year in only 59 games, you're going to say, yeah, he has 7 points this year. Who cares, right? It's going to be tough to get a ton for him. Another good question is, does he fit on this team when they're a contender in Jim Benning's quote 2 years from now, when they're going to be contending for a Stanley Cup? Probably not. You look at the teams that are competing for the Stanley Cup, and their third lines have good two-way players. And players of Gaudette's ilk, especially if you look 2 years from now, we're looking at a guy who's 27, potentially, 26, 27. You can probably find someone in free agency for $1 million, $1.5 million who will get you 30 points on a third line and be a stronger two-way player. And even if he is 31 years old, if he's a bit older, you can just sort of recycle that play in free agency and just keep doing that. Again, I'm not a GM. I don't claim to be, but it does seem, I can sort of see the argument of, is Gaudette really a core piece of this team? He's a great story coming from a 5th round pick and being a good NHL player. That is what he is. He's a solid NHL player. But in 2 years, is he going to be a core part of this team? Probably not. And I think he does have some replaceability there. Another thing I want to talk about is Jim Benning planning on weaponizing expansion slots for this year's expansion draft? And to start off, this seems unlikely. Jim has constantly failed to look ahead to the future. He even said in that interview about 3 weeks back that his team's taking things day by day. And in the past, in the sort of the heart of the rebuild, we never saw any weaponization of the cap space that would have brought in more draft picks potentially. So I do kind of have my doubts. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, the idea behind this is that some teams that are, better than the Canucks right now, some contending teams, have good, middle six or like second pair caliber defensemen that they don't have the expansion slots for, because you can protect 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, and a goalie, but maybe a team's 8th best forward would be, the Canucks' 6th best forward in theory. And this is this team, instead of losing them for nothing to Seattle in the expansion draft, maybe they can get, a 3rd round pick from the Canucks in exchange for basically taking that player off their hands. And then the Canucks have a ton of expansion slots, right? If you bring in someone to protect, you're losing a guy like Roussel or Beagle, and not the end of the world there. So in conclusion, if you can get a decent return, it might be something to consider, especially if you're going to use that return as a weapon in the expansion draft. Um, but I don't know if that's going to happen. If you can flip him in that expansion draft play and get a better player, right? If you can trade Gaudette for a third, let's say, and then you can use that third to pick up, a one team's eighth best D or eighth best forward or fourth best defenseman, then that's probably a pretty shrewd move. I just don't really see it happening. That this management group would have the foresight to make a move like this. And we really haven't seen this management group do any really complicated things in the past. Almost all of their moves have been, pretty straightforward. So I do kind of have my doubts on this being a good idea. Anyways, let me know your thoughts on this below. Give me your thoughts on Adam Gaudette. Do you think the Canucks should trade him? What do you think they would get in return? Or do you think they should just hold on to him, keep trying to develop and see if he'll get better, especially in that face-off circle? Leave your thoughts down below. I do read all of the comments, so I will see whatever you say, and I will probably respond to it as well. So don't forget, like the video, subscribe if you want more, follow me on Twitter, join the Discord, do all that stuff all down below, and I will talk to you tomorrow.